Hello, and welcome to our EG11 ethics assignment, where we will be talking about Arwen's case study. We will be talking about the ethics of engineering and presenting a guideline as to how an engineer should act in a given scenario. We will be discussing the do's and don'ts of an engineer in a real-life situation and analysing what their course of action should be, taking into account their duty as an engineer as well as their integrity and respect for human life. An ethical issue is a situation or problem that requires a person or organisation to decide between alternatives that must be evaluated as right or wrong, ethical or unethical. Ethical issues are open to opinions and are more subjective. This challenges morality and can bring about contrast between what is truth and what is fact. Arwen is a graduate engineer who has been faced with some tough decisions. She has suspicions that the product that her company is using has not been tested properly for side effects that may affect workers as well as users of the product. So, Arwen tells her boss about the issue, but instead of looking into the issue, her boss in fact tells her that they have worked with similar materials and that it has had no side effects in the past. Her boss goes on to say that the product is cheaper and for her not to worry about it.
How the case study is an ethical issue. Aaron has to consider how the new product can affect customers, environment, and the company. Despite the consequences that this decision has on her reputation as an engineer, she must subjectively use her morality to decide how the issues may be handled. Aaron has a series of options to consider. Her first option is to say nothing. The boss is more experienced and knows how to handle and develop the team. Her second option is to allow her name to be included in the report regarding the new product, but note her reservations in writing. Her third option is to notify the Client Trade Association that the full range of risks of the product have been misrepresented. And finally, her fourth option is to go above her boss's head and speak to the line manager. Option 1. Say nothing. By not saying anything, Arwen's conscience may be free of guilt in the short term, as she places her trust in her boss's large number of years of experience. However, this decision comes with many disadvantages, the first of which is the new product has not been properly tested, thus it may have untold side effects on the consumers and the environment. The chemical may be toxic to certain people and lead to severe health issues, and in the worst case, death, thus resulting in a guilty conscience in the long term. The second disadvantage is that Arwen's boss's career may also have a substantial track record of malpractice and fraud. In this case, the boss may have continually used shortcuts to bypass proper product checkups to increase the company's annual revenue, or he or she may have ignored blatant warning signs or red flags for the company's product over the years. If caught, the backlash may not only leave the company bankrupt and Arwen without a job, but the boss may also receive a jail sentence. Option 2. Note her reservations in writing. In this case, Arwen is trying to have a leverage so that if there's a major fallout with the new product, and there are severe consequences, she will plead that she had previously stated her reservations with the product to minimize the repercussions she may suffer. However, if the product sales are fine and there's little to no consumer disapproval, she will reap the benefits to get paid. On the other hand, this has similar disadvantages to her saying nothing and trusting her boss's experience. This decision may still cause damage to human life and result in a depletion of the company she works for. Option 3. Notify the Client Trade Association. In this scenario, Arwen decides that whistleblowing is the best course of action. She feels that the company's endeavor has too large a risk with little reward. She chooses to adhere to her civil duty and report the risk to the Client Trade Association. The greatest advantage of this course of action is the protection of the consumers and the environment to the various adverse effects of the new product. She is protected by law as an employee, and if she is treated unfairly after whistleblowing, she could take her case to the employment tribunal. In contrast, it could lead to the breakdown of trust Companies typically prefer that employees use internal communication systems for queries. There will be a very high possibility of her being fired. Her actions will cost the company large amounts of money to deal with the damage control from ensuing suits and reduction in sales. The legal claims and public backlash may lead to the company having to be shut down. Also, she may face some hostility and resentment from her peers and superiors. This can negatively affect her psychologically, and this characteristic of whistleblowing may also reduce future job application prospects.
The Engineering Council and the Royal Academy of Engineering has collaborated to make a statement of principles that all professional engineers, technicians, and related bodies should follow. Those principles are accuracy and rigor, honesty and integrity, respect for life, law, and the public good, and responsible leaderships. These are the 4 fundamental principles that all engineers should abide by. It sets a standard so that all engineers understand and undertake their responsibilities in an ethical way. The first principle is accuracy and rigor. This principle states that all engineers should always act with care and competence, as well as present and review engineering evidence. They have a duty to identify, evaluate where possible, and to quantify risks. In this case, Arwen is challenged by all of the above. She must show care and competence, as the drug can have serious side effects on the public. The company has a duty to run clinical tests and to ensure that it is safe. When an engineer reviews evidence, they should review it honestly and accurately without any bias. They have a duty to put aside their personal gain and consider the public to make sure that the information is accurately assessed by running clinical tests and ensuring that there are physical tests on the product itself. According to the Royal Academy, professional engineers should adopt the highest standards of professional conduct, openness, fairness, and honesty. One could argue that all 4 of these expectations are being contested in Arwen's case. Professional conduct should encourage extensive research using scientific methods. This ensures the information available on a topic is accurate and reliable. It is clear in the case of Arwen's pesticide that the proper research has not been performed, and therefore it is hard to argue that professional conduct has been exercised. It would also be considered unprofessional to include generic safety guidance on the product instead of guidance specific to the product. Openness suggests easily accessible, precise information regarding the pesticide in question and information regarding pesticide standard or regulations. If the pesticide has not been tested thoroughly as stated in the case study, it is impossible. For fairness to be achieved in this situation, the company would have to give full disclosure about the lack of research to the customers. Finally, we must consider honesty in the second principle. Like fairness, it is not illegal nor dishonest not to disclose the lack of research conducted on the pesticide. It would also be considered dishonest to include generic information and safety guidance if it is not accurate to the product. For fairness to be achieved in this situation, the company would have to give full disclosure about the lack of research to the customers. Although not disclosing the information is not illegal, it would be considered immoral and unfair not to publicly disclose the lack of research.
Society has an inherent responsibility to follow rules, laws, and to respect others' lives and health. As an engineer, these responsibilities are amplified, as a lack of discipline could lead to catastrophic circumstances like loss of life or legal action against a party. The untested pesticide referenced in the case study could be severely toxic or carcinogenic compared to the previous pesticides. It is clear the respect for life principle has been completely ignored by our boss in the case study, as no consideration has been given to the customer's health or well-being when in contact with the product. As a well-practiced engineer, thorough research should be done into possible health complications caused by the product. Laws are introduced to ensure high levels of safety and professionalism in companies and their products. If any unseen health issues arise from customers using the pesticide, there would be enormous legal repercussions from the government and from the customers themselves. Purposely avoiding the appropriate research needed and mislabeling the health warnings on a product as potent as pesticide is highly illegal. This would undoubtedly lead to jail sentences for the boss and possibly Arwen. It could also cost the company enormous amounts of money in fines, fees and legal costs, which in turn could cost jobs and careers of the workers in the company. There must also be a consideration of how any problem with the untested pesticide could affect the community in the long run. Arwen must consider the consequences of releasing the product that could last for longer than his or her lifetime and that could affect many generations in the future. Engineers must also consider the natural resources required to complete a project or sustain production. For example, if a drinks production facility uses water from the local natural resource, it must consider the consequences on the local wildlife or others who depend on the source. Arwen must consider the resources required to make the pesticide and whether any long-term effects will arise from its production. Arwen's case study can be applied to the code of conduct that is required by the Institute of Chemical Engineers. There are laws and regulations that she must follow and can be applied in accordance with this scenario. There are two main categories within these regulations that specifically apply to Arwen: professional competence and personal characteristics. According to the US National Library of Medicine, professional competence is the capability to perform the duties of one's profession generally, or to perform a particular professional task with skill of an acceptable quality. The Code of Conduct states that she has a responsibility to prevent avoidable danger to health or safety. Arwen has a duty to ensure that all people that come into contact with the product are not harmed. It also should be tested for its effect on the environment, as not to harm the wildlife, thus resulting in a debt to the community. The engineers should assess the risk and liability of the situation and prove indemnity insurance. This gives the company a responsibility and a duty of care and allows the protection of others. A professional relation is one where someone is granted professional help from a qualified source. As an engineer, Arwen has a responsibility to notify the institution of any violation. Although Arwen has told her boss about her concerns, the Code of Conduct shows that she has a responsibility to go beyond her boss and to in fact tell a higher power. The professional relationship Arwen has with her boss and the company officials shows how she can apply these rules. Arwen has an obligation to be mindful of the integrity of others in the institution. The fact that Arwen's boss has ignored the issue tests this part of the code. It is obliged for her to inform the institution about her dilemma. By telling her boss, Arwen has fulfilled her responsibility to raise concern about the danger of risk and malpractice or wrongdoing. In this case, she has followed her role in a good way.
Analysing all of the information gathered, we have come up with a 5-point code that we believe all engineers should abide by. The first point is that when assessing a product, they should be treated independently. The one problem in this case is that the products were not tested beforehand. By making this a standard, we can ensure that the health and safety will be taken out in the correct manner. The second rule is that all materials that have been used must be approved by an organisational body. In this case, much like the above, it resolves the problem at hand, and Arwen should not need to go to her boss in the first place, as her boss would not be able to access the harmful product. Regulating and updating health and safety checks will mean that the accuracy and rigour is kept to a high standard. The company competency is also consistently maintained. The fourth rule claims that any complaints must be formally addressed by the leading body. Therefore, when Arwen claims come forward, they are being dealt with, and the boss is not allowed to dismiss it. It ensures that all engineers are heard. The fifth and final rule ensures that a regular competency test is taken. The boss showed lack of competence when claiming that the drug had no side effects. By regulating the test, it can ensure that he is able to follow and knows all of the ethical guidelines. To summarise, an engineer can face many ethical issues. When faced with such issues, they must decipher what actions need to be taken. The Engineering Code of Conduct and Royal Academy Statement of Principles help to guide an engineer when making difficult choices. It shows that an engineer has to take care of the environment and the people that they affect, considering not only their well-being, but those around them. However, it is up to the engineer themselves to follow these guidelines and make a just decision as every situation is unique.